Salut.
Salut.
Okay, I'm here with Feast, obviously. I'm going to do one of my grilled interviews. When I think of your career, the first place I can obviously go back to was this breakout story at IEM Kiev. You qualified, everyone was like, who is this guy? Then you had this run all the way to the round of 8 and actually lost to the guy who won the whole tournament. When you think back now, at the time, that must have been like really cool to just come out of nowhere. Your first tournament, you get really far, you even take a map off the guy who wins. But when you think back now, do you feel as though like you didn't fulfill your potential at that event? Like you could have gone further? What do you think?
Yeah, I think I could have gone further. I guess I was already a bit surprised that I went so far. I was very confident though in my play, even though I never really played against like good players. I saw in ladder that I did good, so I thought I can do it. But then when I lost, I thought, yeah, I did good anyway. Like nobody expected me to do so good, so it was already a good result. My main problem is now that I'm not doing as good as I did back then. So yeah, I think that I'm learning a lot though. Like every time I go to a tournament, I learn new things about me. Like I realized that I really need a lot of warm-up before my games because I'm very inconsistent in general. Like sometimes I go to a tournament and I'm like, I sit at my computer and I'm like, okay, I suck, I'm horrible, I'm not gonna be playing good, and it's like really a bad feeling. And I think maybe a way to counter that is just playing a lot more before the tournament. And if that doesn't work, I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I guess I'll just try that first. Yeah.
I mean, immediately after that, you went to the next IEM, this one in Sao Paulo. And the thing with that tournament was the field, in terms of names, didn't look that crazy. Like, it was won by Supernova, I think. Violet won.
Yeah,
okay. And I think Supernova was second. And at the time, like, we know those players now to be.
Wasn't that before?
No, that was after.
Okay.
Yeah, so, no, but we can continue. So those two players who won the tournament and came second, they weren't as big names as they were later on. Like Supernova since then's won like some medium European tournaments. Like Violet's obviously a much bigger name now. At the time when I saw how well you did at IEM Kiev, I thought like this is a chance like you could maybe even win this whole tournament because this is like a weaker field. Like it's another tournament in IEM, so maybe it'll be like a home field for you. Like how did you lose that tournament?
To be honest, I was very confident yet again, but I lost to Real in PvP, and Real kind of taught me like the mind game playing because he played like hidden nexuses, and basically like what I thought was, okay, I have a good blink micro, I know that I have a better one than he has because I played a lot against him, so I thought, okay, I'm just gonna go blink, play my game, and it's gonna be fine. But then he just did all the things that I didn't expect, and that's how he won. And I realized that, okay, it's not just a micro game, it's also a mind game. So yeah, I think I lost that one only because he was more experienced than I was. I think that now I'm a lot better at mind games, and also yeah, I think like I met Real like a few times now in tournaments, and I did a lot better against him. So yeah, I think I'm better at that in general.
So after that tournament, then we had the next IEM, the World Championships. You got pretty far through the tournament. You got, I think, to the semi-finals. But then in the third place decider, you got to play against MMA. It was the rematch. Like, oh, you know, I'll get a chance to make up for what happened in Kiev.
Yeah.
And he kind of stomped you. Like, what did you think of MMA at the time? Like, was he just like outplaying you completely? Were you just like the wrong strategy? What happened?
I think I didn't play my game at all. I think I had that very same feeling I was telling you about before. Like, okay, I'm gonna play like shit, and I did. Like when I have that in mind, I consider myself unable to win against like anyone. I wouldn't have been able to win even against a low player, but MMA played well, so I think even if I had been in a good shape, maybe I would have lost anyway. So yeah, it's just all about I think that one day out of 3 I played bad and sometimes it can last longer, like 3 days in a row I can play very bad. So I need to find what's the problem with me. I've been looking for it for quite a while now, but I feel like I'm getting closer to an answer. So.
I mean, obviously, since then you haven't had that level of results. So is it the case that you kind of, when you think back on that part, like that part of your career, if you'd have done really well afterwards and won a tournament, you could kind of put your story like, oh, that was when I was like learning the ropes, like I had to lose a few times to be successful. Like you could paint it in a really positive light. But now that your results aren't as good as that, you could maybe look back and think like, oh, those are like missed opportunities. Like I really could have done well there, but like I wasn't ready or something. How do you think back on that first period of your career? Was it successful in your opinion?
I think, yeah, the beginning was pretty successful. I don't regret like not having done better or not having used that time better. I don't really look back in general. Like I don't think it's very useful. I think right now, even though I did wrong, as I said, I learned a lot, and I'm sure I'm going to do better. And yeah, I just hope like people still believe in me, even though I didn't do so good. I still believe in me, and I think that's what matters the most. I think like confidence is really, really important for a pro gamer. I still have it. I know that I can do it, so I will do it.
So it's not the case that if you think of that period and not doing as well now, that you kind of find yourself thinking, oh, what was I doing then that was working then, or what can I go back and do?
I think in general players were like, I didn't really care that much at that time, and I think that was really an asset because I wasn't like a pro gamer back then. I was just playing a little for fun, I could say. So there was less stress when I played. But I only think the reason I did better back then was that I didn't really have those bad days as much. That's the only difference, I think.
Most players, when they first go to their first offline events, usually they go to the offline events because they've been doing well online. So as a result, they go in thinking, well, you know, yeah, it's my first LAN, but I played that guy online, I've beaten him, or I think I know how to play with him. So usually they're actually very confident. Usually the opposite of what happened to you, they usually get smacked down immediately, like they're out in the first group stage, or they lose to some guy who they thought they were way better than. So their mindset of thinking like, if I ever got my chance, I'd be good versus those guys, is kind of like destroyed immediately. But it seems like for you, it was almost the opposite. Like you went there and it was like, wow, I actually can beat these guys. Well, maybe I am just a top player and I didn't know or something. Was this like how it was for you? Did you really have that level of confidence?
I was very, very confident. But,
were you cocky?
Am I cocky?
Were you cocky at the time, do you think?
Yeah, but I mean, I don't say it to anyone. Like usually I'm very reserved.
So just inside?
Yeah, it's like I can even be mean to them in my head just so I can feel better about myself.
Oh, okay.
I'm very confident about my micro-digestion, like in general. So when I see other players playing, sometimes I'm feeling like, okay, this guy doesn't just play as well as me, doesn't really handle his units as much as I do. So I can feel confident about that. But I sometimes feel like it's just that I'm not as smart. Not that I think I'm not smart, I think I'm very smart. But like gameplay-wise, strategy is like I need to have a plan since the very beginning of the game. And I know some players are like they have a better feeling in game. Like even though they're not prepared, they just make better decisions.
So who are you thinking of there, Stephano?
I think Stephano is a good example of that. I think I'm really excelling when I'm just very prepared.
Since actually you were, I mean, I think you were very briefly in a team with Stephano, like a couple of months or something?
Yeah. So what do you...
Okay, so you were in a team with Stephano, and he's like known to have like, people consider out of the foreigners, he has like the winning mindset. You've been in the team now with ForGG, like he's a Korean guy, he knows the Korean practice methods, all those years living in Kesper houses, even had like a good result in Brood War. What do you think you've picked up from these players? Like has it developed you in any sense being around those guys?
I don't think I took anything from Stephano, because we just didn't play that much. But yeah, from ForGG I think I learned a lot because I was at the Millenium house with him. And I actually think ForGG is just very, very professional. So it helped me a lot.
In what sense? What does he do differently?
He's basically he's very serious, and he always plays like this same number of games per day, and he thinks like he approached the game in like the Korean way, like a lot more about being greedy and playing a little more dangerous. And I think it helped me a lot because I was very European style minded, like playing very safe, okay, I won't lose to that, I won't lose to that. Instead of just taking chances sometimes, I think it's very important, especially once you know your opponent. And yeah, just playing a lot, like having people that plays a lot around you is very important. I think I'm not structured, organized. It's really not me, so having someone like that around me was useful.
So, being as you're not teammates with Stephano anymore, but you were for a while, it's bullshit when he says he doesn't practice at all, right?
Well, as I said, like I've never been with him, so I don't know.
Okay.
But I don't think he practices as much. I think he understood the game fast. I feel like he doesn't understand it as much as he did before, sorry. Because I think the game changed a lot and he relies a lot on what he previously learned, which explains why now he's not doing as well. But I think he understood fast, and I think that's really all that matters. Like, micro-gestion is important, but what really matters is just understanding the game well, I think.
Well, then in that case, I mean, there was a famous example where he says he never played for a whole week. He had a whole week off StarCraft, then he flew to WCS Europe and won the whole tournament and beat all these best players in Europe. Does that mean that compared to the normal foreigners, Stephano was like unusually talented in some way, or it's easier for him to play with less practice? What do you think it is?
I think, of course, he's probably exaggerating it. I think he handles the stress pretty well. That's like a good quality, and I just think like once you got it, I guess once you understand the game, you can win a lot of tournaments as long as people don't understand it as much as you do. So in some way, I think he was lucky just to understand it. It's not just being smart. Yeah, that's what I have to say.
If I ever talk to any other players about Feast, they always say like, oh, he loves blink play, it's always blink play. Some of them even say if they know they're playing you, they purposely just veto like blink maps just because of that. Like, what attracts you to this style so much? Does it just match your strengths? What do you think it is?
I think it matches my strength, yeah, because as I said, I like to micro my units. I think I do it better than a lot of players. And also I like, I think like, this is mostly for PvP, right?
Sure.
Because yeah, I think PvP in general is like not really skillful once it gets to like a lot of Colossus and so on. I think it's a lot about luck. I don't like that. I don't like that you can win with just just that kind of luck. It's hard to explain, but position doesn't really do everything. Sometimes it's hard to explain why somebody won a PvP match. Like they had the same army, the position was pretty much the same, and you don't get it, but just someone comes on top. Yeah, I don't want that, and I really like the games that just go fast. I like it because that's where I consider usually that the most skillful player will win.
That's interesting then. Let me give you a theory that I was told in another interview. A few months back I talked to NightEnD, who's someone with some very colourful opinions, and he told me that, I mean, he said, 40% of Protoss players who are on the top don't deserve to be there because when Protoss play Protoss, he says that the micro, etc., is sort of capped out, like there's not that much needed, and so as a result he thinks that if he's better than another player, there's a point at which he can't really show it in any way in the game, like they'll just be sort of similar, and that's what he thinks makes it like not as skillful in that sense. So do you kind of agree with this? It sounds like maybe you do.
I think in a lot of circumstances that's true. Like
give an example.
For example, like blink is like one of the ways to show your micro, I guess. But then when you play Robo and Immortals, you can show it, but usually when it gets to like the same army compositions, like Robo against Robo, then you can't really show it, and it doesn't make a lot of sense who's winning or who's not. It's just about who has been greedier, like who didn't get punished for being greedy. It's like, I think he's right in a lot of circumstances, situations.
Okay, so I mean, it sounds, if someone doesn't know your game very well, that you wouldn't like PvP from the things you described here, and yet actually a lot of your good results have come as a result of PvP. I mean, most of your runs have had PvP wins, like being Hero. He was like a much bigger name than you at the time. You did pretty well against NaNiwa this last DreamHack, I seem to remember, and you also had like, I think quite a few Protoss in your group that you got through there.
Yeah, pretty much only Protoss.
So is it the case that you've also benefited from PvP? Like, is it good in the sense that it means you can potentially beat a bigger name or a better player? How do you balance that up?
I think I won, like in the past, a lot of PvPs. Right now I'm not really doing that well in PvP, but it's just like, it's just a moment. I think later I will be fine again. But like the players are getting better and better, which means PvP, which has a lot of build order wins, once player really understand that. For example, I would play Blink. It's really bad for me because they can just blind counter it, and once they do it, it's very hard for me to just make it through. So I still think that Blink is one of the only ways to still win. Like, it doesn't really have a lot of build order loses, which is why I really like it. When you play Stargate, like, there's a lot of things you can die to early on, and Robo the same thing against Stargate. Yeah, it's just
Okay, talking about not just Protoss versus all matchups. Every other interview I've seen with a Protoss player is like 20 minutes of whining about Zerg, so I don't want to go too much into like Zerg imbalance. I want to kind of put some complaints I hear about Protoss to you and see what you think about them.
Okay.
So, first of all, any player who's a Zerg player now and has heard like all the whine from the Protoss players, like, oh, it's overpowered, it's easy for you. A lot of them complain to me and say like, yeah, but you don't realize how strong Immortal All-In is. Like, if they do it, it feels like I can never stop it. Like, I can't counter it unless I do everything perfectly. Is there any merit to this? Is it insanely strong?
I don't think it's insanely strong. I think it's really like now, since PartinG did that Immortal All-In a lot of times, I think Zergs have gotten a lot better against it, and I don't know if I'm just bad at it or if it's just the Zerg that are a lot better, but usually when I do it, I lose. And from what I've seen, even from other Protosses, they just lose usually when they do it. It's just all about, is the Zerg being too greedy or not? And a lot of Zergs, like if we didn't have this all-in, a lot of Zergs wouldn't even make roaches at all and go to Broodlords even faster, which would make the matchup like really impossible on 3 base to win against a Zerg that goes to fast 4 base, etc. So I think this option that we have is really necessary to even make like 3 base Protoss timings like be possible. And yeah, like when we saw PartinG doing all these all-ins, I feel like the Zergs that were against him, like for instance San, like he just couldn't counter it. His build that he was doing couldn't counter it, so he lost like 3 times in a row. I thought it was weird to see like such a good player not know how to counter it. So yeah. Is that it? Yeah, it's it.
Okay, so this might sound a bit long, but let me get through all parts of it. Okay, so when Terran was on top in the early days, people used to like just make an excuse. So they would say, okay, well, what happens is, it's not that Terran's imbalanced, it's that all the best players in Korea play Terran, and they just practice really, really hard, and they kind of make it sound like it's just a coincidence that all the best players play Terran. Now, in Europe especially, like nearly all the best players, like a lot of them are Zergs. There's a lot of Zergs in general, like the final parts of tournaments are full of Zergs, and people are using the same excuse. They're saying, oh no, you see the best players just play Zerg. It's not that, and they're practicing really hard and stuff. It's like the same excuse. Well, to put like a reverse version on that, I've heard people throughout the history of the game, especially Zerg players, if a Protoss ever complains about Zerg being overpowered, they say, yeah, but you know, the Protoss has so many things they can actually do if they want to beat us, like things they can do early in the game and stuff. And so really it's just that the Protoss players are all stupid, or they're all just gambling, and they're all just gimmicky, and they do this and that, and they kind of make out as though it's just like, oh, okay, so all the genius players play Terran here, now all the hard practicing players play Zerg here, and every Protoss player is just like gambling. He's trying to just blind counter me or do something crazy. Like, is this all bullshit? Is there any line of truth to it? And like, how do you think like Protoss is a race in this sense?
So I just want to be sure that I understood the question. So you're saying that people say that
other pro players, Zergs especially, tell me that Protoss players are just all gamble, they're all finicky, and they're sort of implying that the reason why Protoss doesn't do that well against Zerg is because they don't play it right. You know, they don't play the proper game. They just, you know, if they lose a macro game, they just DT all in next game or something, like gambling the whole time. Is there anything to it in sense like does Protoss have to be played that way?
I think the reason that most Protosses do that is because they just feel it's imbalanced. I can't really say it's not true. I think Zerg is favored, but I think you can like it's really hard to play safe against a Zerg, especially if the Zerg, like for instance, doesn't do any roaches. Like I don't think you can really win a macro game. So I think a lot of Protoss gamble, that's true, but I don't think it's bad, because I think in a lot of cases it can be really necessary. So yeah, Protosses gamble, that's true, because they have to.
I mean, one of the reasons I ask is what it leads me to is when I'm trying to think, so okay, even in Korea when the Zerg was at its height, it still seemed like the absolute best Protoss in Korea could still win. They could still handle the Zergs, they could still beat these players, like, you know, Rain, PartinG, these guys, they could still somehow win. So when I've asked players, you know, what was the difference between the top Protoss over there and the top Protoss in the foreigner world? And an interesting answer MaNa gave me was that the Protoss in Korea, he thinks just execute their build perfectly. Like they have the build in mind and they can just do it perfectly. Whereas like I'm saying, the perception in the West is that the Protoss has to gamble if he wants to like get ahead or have to. So with this in mind, is there any truth to this? And does this mean from the fact that you're not very good at the Immortal all-in, that your execution isn't so good? Like, what do you think of these two things?
I think like the Protoss in, like for instance, Rain, he really impressed me because I think he really understood the matchup a lot better than we did. And like I learned really a lot from his games. And right now I'm seeing like he's still like, he's doing his builds, and if the Zerg does this or that, he can still lose, I think. But he's really playing all the mind games. Like, for example, if he goes for Robo Expand first, he's pretending he's gonna Immortal win, which should make a good Zerg make roaches. But like in Europe, I think since the level is lower, you can see like, for example, a Protoss doing that fake Immortal win, but then the Zerg doesn't reply accordingly to it, which makes like the 3-base timing that you're going to do afterwards not work. So if the level is higher in general, mind games are going to be stronger, and I think Rain and those Protosses, they play really mind games. So yeah.
Okay. Actually, let's talk about some Korean Protosses then. Do you watch GSL much?
I did, but I mean this time Protoss lost like very fast, so I didn't really watch. Okay,
but I mean you know the top Korean Protoss players.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so if we talk about like, I mean the three that come to mind immediately, obviously PartinG, Rain, and Creator. You talked a little bit about PartinG before, very briefly. You talked a bit more about Rain here. So can you tell me more about what you think PartinG's so good at, and what about Creator? What do you think of this guy?
Creator, I have to say out of the three is the one I like the less.
Why?
Why? Because his gameplay doesn't always make sense to me. Like for example, I think he plays a bit more blindly. But I mean, he's good, of course. I mean, he's doing good results. It's just that I prefer the two others. I like PartinG's style in the way that he likes to. He believes really a lot in himself, and you can see it in his gameplay because he doesn't play always macro. He doesn't hesitate to make like builds where you interact with your opponent. And I like Rain in the way that he plays that macro style a lot, lately I've seen him change a lot to more like PartinG style, like very aggressive. And I think that's good for him. I think you need to have various styles. But what I like to see the most is like a very solid macro game, which is why I prefer Rain the most, and then PartinG, and then Creator.
So if you had to bet now, in 1 year from now, which one of those three, or another Protoss if you want, would be the best Protoss in the world? Who would you put your money on, like based on what you've seen so far? Who would be the best Protoss in the world in 1 year?
I think PartinG is probably the one. He's just, I think he's really playing the game as it's meant to be, like with dangers and sometimes macros. So yeah, I guess he looks like to me like he's the best Protoss.
So now we talked about like the people who are acknowledged as like the best Korean Protosses. The person I want to ask now about is MC, because obviously his name will always be huge because of his accomplishments, and he still can like win a tournament or come deep in a foreign tournament every now and then. But it's been quite a while since he was this player who was winning lots of tournaments. Like, do you feel as though his levels dropped off? I mean, some people will say he was just so good at 2-base timings all in, and now maybe that's not as effective as it once was, or people have figured his style out. What do you think of MC in this sense?
I think MC has been doing like very well for such a long time, and I never really understood it, because even in his timings, like they didn't look as strong as they possibly could be. Like for instance, when I see PartinG, like his timing is very strong and he plays it very well. MC, he plays his timing very well, but it's not always very strong. I think that's the main difference between those two. I never liked MC, I never liked the way he played. He won a lot, I never really understood it, so maybe I'm not the best person to talk about it.
Okay, so I want to talk about some European Protoss players now. The first guy I want to start off with is actually NaNiwa, because he's like the biggest name of the European Protoss. He had his 2 GSL runs where he got to the round of 8, and so everyone was like, oh, he's the best foreigner, he's really good. But then when he started coming back to foreign tournaments, his results have been pretty terrible. Like, he had like an okay result at DreamHack, but other than that, he's had some results where he goes out first round or very early. Like, what do you think of NaNiwa? Like, is he still the player that people associate with his name? What do you think his problems are?
What do I think his problems are? He plays. Okay. I think NaNiwa is very smart in his builds, usually. He plays not really timing, but smart. Like, he's usually gonna outsmart a bit his opponent. But I haven't really seen his games, to be honest, so I can't really talk about him. I'd rather not.
Okay. But in your own mind, whereabouts does he rank amongst the foreigners Protoss? Is he still the top dog? Is he like top 2, top 3? Where would you put him mentally?
I never thought of that, and I don't like to even think about it. I don't have a top 5 or.
Okay.
I don't really care too much about the European scene, because I think they're less good.
Well, another European Protoss, MaNa. MaNa's had some, like he won DreamHack. He's had some big results in that sense, and and throughout his whole career, he's had some finals, semi-finals, a lot of these results. It seems like when I ask other players about MaNa, it's like a mixed bag. Like, some of them think he's pretty good. He's like one of the best Protoss. Other people think like he's like streaky. Sometimes he has a good run in a tournament. Other times he just bombs out early. Like, what is your perspective on MaNa? Like, how old do you know him? What do you think of his play?
I think for a long time he played like a lot of the same style, like very, very safe, just like Europeans in general. And then when he went to Korea, he came back, and I saw like the finals ForGG against MaNa in that WCS thing, and I thought he changed a lot. Like, he went for a lot more risky strategies. I always liked MaNa style, because I like to see in general like that safe kind of play. So I like to see MaNa play. And what was the question again about him?
Like, do you think is he the best foreign Protoss in your mind, or what do you think about him in that sense? Is he like inconsistent? What do you think make of the different opinions?
I think he's pretty consistent, and I don't know if it's the best Protoss in Europe. I don't know.
Okay, how about this then? So NaNiwa and MaNa, just try and compare them to the top Korean Protoss we were talking about now. Are they even in the same ballpark as Protoss players? Do they have strengths that they share? Are there key weaknesses that you don't see in the Koreans that you see in them? What do you think?
I think like if I had to compare them to Korean Protosses, I think the timings of the Koreans are a lot sharper, and their builds in general. So yeah, I think that's what is like the biggest difference, I guess. Yeah. I don't really.
Do they have any strengths though, NaNiwa and MaNa, that are comparable, like equal level to the Korean guys? Do they have anywhere that they do excel in the same way?
I think in every way the Korean Protoss are better.
Okay, one more.
I'm really talking about the high-level Protosses, by the way. Like the three we talked of, minus Creator.
Okay, so they're as good as Creator?
I don't know Creator enough, but I think, for example, MaNa and Creator, they look quite a lot alike, I think. That's it. That's what I've seen.
So one more European Protoss I wanted to talk about, Monchi. So he's come out of nowhere, like really not so long ago, like suddenly just shot up. Some people think like some of the earlier tournaments he did good at weren't such big tournaments, didn't have such great players at them. He did pretty well at DreamHack. Do you get the sense that he's headed to be like a top tier player in the whole world? Do you think like we've seen as good as he is? What's your sense? I mean, you play in Europe, so you must have an idea of how good he is.
I didn't really play him, but he was telling me that he played a bit of League of Legends and Dota, and that. So I don't know if he's really a lot in StarCraft, like. But from the results he's done, is like beating a lot of Zergs, right? And then winning PvPs.
Yeah, people say PvPs is his worst matchup in theory.
Yeah, like I think he showed that, like at this tournament, that he wasn't so good at it. I think he did good. I think he can do good too in the future. But how far will he go? I think it depends a lot on if he's gonna train a lot or not.
Do you feel as though the effects of the recent patch, the nerfs to Zerg in certain areas, has that strengthened Protoss at all? Because when I asked some people who would benefit the most, they said like, well, like certain 3-base timing all-ins will now be more effective, like Immortal Sentry might be more powerful. Is this exaggerating it too much? Was it really that much of a nerf?
I think the only real nerf is that the DX of the infestors die to one storm. No, I don't think it makes a big difference, like pretty much nothing. So no, I don't think Zerg is like still as strong in my mind. And maybe the only thing that it really helps with, but I think that it's already a bad situation for Protoss. But if the game were to go to carriers and High Templars against infestors, broodlords, corruptors, I think in that situation it really makes a big difference that the X die faster to Storm. That's it.
In general, do you actually think that carriers are viable versus Zerg? Because I've actually heard some of the Zergs also complain like, well, if the Protoss just goes carriers, then there's nothing I can do. And I usually say to them, yeah, but how does he get to carriers? Like, what do you think?
I think because of Fungal, the interceptors are bad, and basically the Zerg doesn't even need to make units like corruptors. I think, like for instance, doing corruptors is bad. Like if you only make spore crawlers and infestors, you just fungal the interceptors, and the Protoss can never ever attack you. Which means that the only way for a Protoss to win is to wait for the Zerg to attack, and in that case, well, maybe you can win. But in general, I would never want to go in late game against a Zerg, because I consider that if the Zerg knows how to play in late game, I can't win. But then, since so many Protoss like do some timings before the very late game, some Zergs don't even know how to play late game. So maybe those are the Zergs that told you that.
Okay, another Protoss player I spoke to, Socke, he told me an interesting theory, which is that he says that even though people on forums still keep talking about the Protoss deathball, they keep saying, you know, if the Protoss gets to the deathball, no one can stop it, and then they're thinking of the period when everyone was just Colossus and Void Ray and stuff, I guess. He says that that's like been a myth for like a year almost. Like he thinks that if you get to this death ball, it's not necessarily even that good, like when you're maxed out versus Terran or, you know, in these scenarios. Like, do you agree?
Yeah, I agree totally. I think like here, we saw Cass against NightEnD, and Cass did like 35 ghosts and only Vikings. This is an army that is really, really hard to beat.
And I think NightEnD was like 3-3 and Kaz was like 2-2.
Yeah, it's like it's really hard, but I don't think NightEnD played his best. So I think Kaz should have won and he won. Yeah, the Protoss deathball doesn't really exist anymore. I feel like even in late game, like the very, very late game, Protoss is disadvantaged in every matchup. Like for example, against Zerg, I think everybody knows about it, and against Terran because of mass ghosts Vikings. Now I must say that for Terran to get to this army is very hard. So I don't consider PvT to be a bad matchup. I think it's one of the best we have, so I won't complain about it. But in the very late game, I consider Terran to be advantaged.
If I asked you to look back across your career and think of like the big people you've played, the big matches or the big opponents, big names, and I asked you to pick out one person for each race, including Protoss, where when you played against them, they just felt like the most unstoppable player. This guy just felt like, you can't beat this guy. Like he's just so good. Who stands out in your mind when you first think for each race? So Zerg, Protoss, Terran. Who comes to mind first?
I'm not really. I don't really believe in magic and stuff like that. So I never really had that feeling, but against some players, I thought, okay, my matchup is bad at this time, and I'm against these good players in this race, so I won't be able to win. I had that against MVP in one of the IEMs. I think I had that against MMA as well, where I lost 0-3. And against Zergs, PvP I never had it. Against Zergs, like, yeah, I guess against probably a lot of Zergs I had it too, but only because at that point I considered my matchup to be bad. So it's never really about the opponent, it's really a lot about me in my mind. So yeah.
Okay, well, let me modify it for Protoss and Zerg then.
I just want to say something. It's like, in my head I'm playing against a race first and then against a player.
So let me modify it for the Zerg and Protoss then. Just tell me, who do you think was the best player, only based on your own games. So they can even be practice games if you want. Like, who just felt like this was the best Zerg I've played, this was the best Protoss I've played?
I think the best Protoss I've played was MC, only because of his micro. The best Terran I've played was MVP and Zerg. To me, Zerg is really just a race, so I don't even care about the opponent. But I guess I care about their tendencies, like if they're more gamble style or safe. But yeah, I never really cared about who was playing it. It's just a Zerg.
Is there an opponent out there, perhaps a Korean, who you never got a chance to play yet, but you'd love to play this guy in like a best of 5 or something, like a full-on, like, you just get to go head-to-head with this guy and see how you do? Who would be good either to test yourself against, or someone who's really big name you think you could beat? Who would you pick?
I think in PvT, Polt, I think is a good player. And then for Zergs,
why is he good in PvT?
Why is he good in PvT? Because he's very aggressive, and I like to play against aggressive players to see how safe I am. Like in general, I think that's the best practice I get. Because in Europe, as I said, so many players are playing safe that once you play against a Korean, you're like, okay, I'm safe against this and this, but then you realize you actually weren't. So yeah, I mean, playing against Koreans in general must be really good for that. And I'm intending to go to Korea in January, like maybe to the TSL house, since Millenium has a partnership with them. Yeah, I hope I can go there.
Will you play GSL?
No, it would only be for 1 month.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the people I really want to play. I think there's a lot of, like Zerg, to me, I still feel like it's just a race and it's not that hard to play it well, so I don't really care about a Zerg opponent.
Even though your career has been quite short so far, it's been like roughly a year, I think, or so. Is there a particular moment that you think of fondly in your career, like this was the best moment for me, or like a moment where things felt like everything were going well, and so now when you're in like the darker period or you're trying to build back up, you can think like that's where I want to get back to. Like that was the moment where everything felt good. Do you have this sense at all? Is there something you can pick out, a good memory?
I can pick a good memory, but I think I never used my full potential. So there's no period that I really want to go back to. I want to exceed it. Good periods were I really liked my games against MMA back in Kiev, because that was really my first event, I think. And yeah, it was just really fun to play against him, to compare myself to what I thought was a good Terran. Yeah, that's a good memory. And also, of course, the IEM World Championship, because I just did good. Getting 4th place was pretty good at that time.
If I ask you to cast your mind forward, so you think of where you've been the last few months, where you are now, like what level you're going, what trajectory, where will Feast be in 1 year? If you just think now, like where does your mind go to? What level will you be at? Like how will things have changed?
One of my goals is really to be one of the best in Europe. I don't think being one of the best in Korea to me is kind of impossible. Not because Koreans are because I think in Korea, basically there's so many good players that in a game like StarCraft, where a lot of build arguments exist, I think it's really, really hard to be even considered the best player. So that's not really what I'm aiming for. But I think in Europe it's doable to be the best player. So that's what I'm aiming for.
Okay, do you have a final message? Anyone you want to say hello to or thank?
Yeah, I want to really thank my team because they've been really great to me. Yeah, I want to thank all the people that are still supporting me, even though I haven't been doing so good lately. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And I want to thank you for the interviews you're doing, because I think they're really interesting, compared to a lot of other interviewers, always asking me the same question. So yeah, it's really great. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.